Hey guys, tonight we re-stepping into the damp, lantern-lit streets of 17th century Kyoto. That's right, the ancient Japanese capital, just as the Edo period is beginning, and you are about to become a proud night watchman, more specifically, pretty peaceful. Maybe even perfect for falling asleep too, right? Well, you might want to prepare yourself, because according to historians, the very first challenge of this job might not be ghosts, and it might not be thieves either. It might simply be this: you may not survive your first day, only if you genuinely enjoy the content. And feel free to leave a comment telling me what city you are in and what time it is right now. I'm curious to know which sleepless souls, hundreds of years in the future, maybe turn on a small fan for some background noise. And let's step into tonight. Story. Your first instruction comes from a sleep veteran who looks even less excited about the night shift than you are. He shoves a wrinkled, dark, blue cotton uniform into your arms. It still carries traces of last night. Incense, or more accurately, the incense that tried and failed to hide the smell of sweat. He tells you the official name of the job is Sujiban. But don't worry about remembering something that complicated. All you really need to know is this: your territory is a quiet, unremarkable street somewhere in Kyoto. Your partner is a torch that could go out at any moment, and your job is simple. After sunset, you light the paper street lanterns along the road. Then, before dawn, and not smashed by a drunk samurai who decides the lantern looks like a good punching bag. Remember this, the old watchman says, squinting toward the faint outline of the Higashiyama Mountains in the distance. Officials from the magistrate's office sometimes come around to check if they catch you dozing off. Or if even one lantern goes out, your pay, well, those few scoops of coarse rice, will be cut in half. He pauses, then lowers his voice, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is this: if you ever hear footsteps behind you during patrol, don't turn around. Use this instead. He hands you a short stick. Calling it a weapon might be generous. It looks more like a slightly thicker rolling pin. Knock it on the ground 3 times, he says. Then count to 30. You want to ask why? But the old watchman is already yawning as he disappears into the shadows of the courtyard. You're left standing there, gripping the wooden stick. The rough texture of the fabric in your hands reminds you that this is all very real. You're about to patrol an ancient city, without GPS, without radios, and without proper streetlights. Because the torch in your hand is the streetlight, you change into the uniform. The sound of the cloth rubbing together seems strangely loud in the quiet evening air. The sky still holds the last streak of deep purple from the sunset. The air smells of evening cooking fires. The arrival of dusk in 17th century Kyoto is something you can actually hear. You stand at the doorway of the narrow watch post, the band show, when the great temple bell to the east begins to sound. Dong, dong. Each strike lingers in the air, long and heavy, as if the city itself is slowly. This is the evening drum, the signal of curfew. With every echo of the bell, doors across the city begin to close. The wooden sliding doors of merchant houses, the large imposing gates of samurai residences. The turning of wooden hinges rises and falls across the streets, like an awkward but strangely solemn symphony. Your task now is simple: Before all those doors finish closing, you must walk to the beginning of the street under your watch. There stands a wooden post. Hanging from it is a square iron cage. Inside waits the first thing you must deal with tonight, an unlit Andon, a street lantern. The torch in your hand was lit by the old watchman before he left. He used the charcoal fire that's kept glowing in the watch post at all times. You hold the torch carefully, shielding the flame with your hand. If you walk too quickly, the torch is simple. Just a long wooden stick wrapped at the end with oil-soaked hemp cloth. When it burns, it gives off a sharp, smoky smell that makes your eyes sting slightly. But tonight, it is your only companion and your only weapon. By the time you reach the wooden post, night has fully fallen. Not the deep blue darkness of modern cities, softened by electric lights. This darkness is different, pure, thick, like someone has poured black ink into a pond. You look up. Above the narrow slice of sky between rooftops, the first stars have begun to appear. Then you lower your head and examine the lantern by torchlight. It is an extremely simple device. A small wooden frame, 3 sides covered with white washi paper, 1 side left open. Inside sits a small clay dish. The dish contains lamp oil, and a thin wick lies across the surface, with just a tiny tip sticking out. Your job is to light that tip with a torch. Sounds easy enough, right? The city magistrate's office only provides a limited amount each week. If you spill it because your hand shakes, or if the wick is trimmed too long and burns the oil too quickly, then by the second half of the night the lamp will run dry, and you'll be standing in the dark until morning. Afterward, of course, part of your pay will be deducted. Historians still argue about what kind of oil these lamps used. Some say rapeseed oil, others believe it was fish oil, and some insist it came from a plant called perilla. But for you, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, it definitely does not smell pleasant when it burns. Letting the flame kiss the tip of the wick. Poof. A small orange glow is born inside the paper lantern. It's weak, about as bright as a single candle, just enough to illuminate the lantern itself, and a small circle of ground beneath it. You can see the flame trembling gently, like a newborn animal that isn't quite sure about the world yet. And your job is to guard these timid little creatures all night long. You walk down the street, lighting every lantern fixed to its wooden post. Some hang high. You have to stand on your toes, forcing you to duck inside with your torch. Each time a lantern lights, you instinctively glance around. The street is empty. The only thing moving is your shadow, stretched long and thin by the firelight, dancing across the closed wooden doors. At last, you light the final lantern. You lean forward, hands on your knees, catching your breath. The street falls silent. Only the faint crackling of flames and the sound of your own heartbeat remain, and then a thought suddenly occurs to you. Now that every lantern is lit, where are you supposed to go? The old watchman taught you how to light the lamps, but he never explained how to survive the long night afterward. You stand there in a city of 1 million sleeping people, and for the first time, you realize something. Staying awake can be an incredibly lonely thing. The sense of loneliness quickly faded. Once the lanterns were lit, things began gathering around that I hadn't noticed before. Not people, shadows, under the light, tiny lives, flickered in and out of sight. An orange cat jumped down from the roof, stopping at the edge of the light. Its eyes glowed amber in the firelight. Then it flicked its tail and slipped into the shadow along the wall. Somewhere in the distance, dogs began barking, one after another, as if passing along some kind of message. I tightened my grip on the short stick in my hand and remembered what the old watchman had called the sounds and movements. The real job was tending these lamps, patrol the street, walk from one end to the other, and back again, making sure every lamp was still burning. The wick was what most often caused trouble. The flame would grow weaker and weaker until it finally gave a thin wisp of blue smoke and went out. So besides the torch and the short stick, my kit also included a small iron clip. Standing on tiptoe before the lamp, I would use the clip to pinch off that blackened tip of the wick. My hands couldn't shake. If I pulled too hard and dragged out the whole wick, the lamp would be finished. Sometimes the wick burned too long. The flame stretched high, scorching yellow marks into the paper shade and spitting sparks. It was like feeding a temperamental baby. Too much or too little would both cause trouble. Hot or too cold wouldn't do either. While I was fixing one of the lamps, I heard footsteps. Tap. The old watchman. His warning flashed through my mind like lightning. Don't turn around. I froze where I stood, still holding the small iron clip. The footsteps grew closer. I could even hear the person's heavy breathing. Sweat began forming on the hand gripping my stick. Was it a patrolling samurai? An inspector from the magistrate? Office or something else? Stealing myself, I followed the old watchman's instructions and tapped the ground 3 times with the stick. Thump, thump, thump. Then I began counting silently. 1. A hoarse voice spoke behind me. Tonight, moon is hidden by the clouds. Yes, that's why the lamps must burn a little longer tonight. Silence. I counted to 28. Then the voice laughed softly, the sound carrying both fatigue and relief. Watch post at the northern crossroads. The dogs over there were barking too fiercely tonight, so I came to see if wild boars had come down from the hills. Only then did I dare turn around. The firelight illuminated a face just as weary as mine. The same dark blue cotton uniform, the same soot, blackened fingers, the same eyes reddened by smoke. We looked at each other for a moment. Nothing was said. In the deep night of 17th century Kyoto, 2 night watchmen meeting needed very few words. He pointed to the lamp behind me, signaling that the wick was still a little crooked, and then continued toward the district he was responsible for. His footsteps gradually faded into the darkness. I let out a long breath and straightened the wick. The loneliness was still there, but now there was also a faint warmth. In this sleeping city, at least one other person was awake, just like me. After the northern watchman disappeared into the night, I suddenly realized a serious problem. In the middle of exchanging passphrases and information, I had completely forgotten to ask him the most important question: what time it was. In modern society, you only need to glance at your wrist or reach into your pocket to find the answer. But in 17th century Kyoto, there were no wristwatches, no phones, not even pocket watches. The sort of precise devices that still rested in the waistcoat pockets of European aristocrats, and would take more than 100 years to cross the oceans and reach Japan. The bells of distant temples could tell you the approximate hour. The bell at dusk marked Mutsu of evening, and the bell at dawn marked Mutsu of morning. But now it was deep night. Even the monks needed sleep. They weren't going to climb out of bed just to ring the bell for a lone night watchman, so you had to rely on yourself, on instinct, on experience, and most of all on the torch in your hand that was slowly burning shorter and shorter. I glanced down at the torch, the flame wrapped in oil. Soaked cloth was no longer as lively as when it had first been lit. According to the old watchman's training, one torch would burn for roughly 1 toki, about 2 modern hours. The one in my hand had already burned down by more than half, meaning I'd been wandering these streets for nearly an hour and a half. Doing the math, it must have been around midnight. But a more precise sense of time came from the water clock, not the complicated official astronomical device that used flowing water to measure time. At the watch post, there was a simplified version, a large ceramic jar filled with water, with a small hole at the bottom. Drop by drop, the water leaked into a smaller jar below. As the water level rose, the wooden piece floated upward. Before I set out, the old watchman had made a mark on it. In theory, when I returned to replace my torch, one glance at the wooden marker, this level would tell me how much time had passed. But that was the theory. Or the water flowed faster or slower depending on the temperature. Worse still, sometimes a rat would run over to drink from it and bump the wooden marker sideways. So the real way to judge time was something even more primitive, listening to the sounds of the night. Kyoto in the deep night had its own biological clock. When night had just fallen, you would hear doors closing throughout the houses, married couples arguing, children crying. In the first half of the night, things quieted somewhat, but you could still hear late drinkers being questioned by patrolmen, or the sound of a shamisen drifting from some townhouse. That meant it was already the second half of the night. This was when Kyoto slept most deeply. It was also said to be the hour when the boundary between the worlds of the living and the unseen grew thinnest. No dogs barking, no human voices, not even the wind. Only the small street lantern in front of me continued burning stubbornly, making a faint hissing sound. Then I remembered what the northern watchman had mentioned earlier. Wild boars coming down from the mountains. In those days, Kyoto might have been the capital, but the boundary between city and wilderness was vague. Walk a little farther east, and you would reach the pitch, black slopes of the Higashiyama Mountains. Wild boars, deer, even wolves would sometimes slip into the city on hungry winter nights, searching for food. They weren't afraid of people. That was why the torches and lanterns weren't only for lighting the streets. They are warnings to those uninvited theorists. Here's light here. Stay away. Just as I was thinking about this, I heard a tiny crack, the sound of a twig snapping. The flame flickered in the air, casting light in that direction. Nothing. Only closed wooden doors and black hollow eaves. But I knew something was there, watching. I couldn't see it, but it could see me perfectly. The torch exposed me completely. I tightened my grip on the short stick and began moving slowly toward the sound. Each step was light, careful not to startle whatever might be there. Halfway down the street, I suddenly saw a pair of eyes, right beside the stone steps of a house entrance. 2 green eyes reflecting the torchlight stared back without moving. My heart nearly skipped a beat. At some point it had circled around ahead of me and was now sitting on the stone steps. Outsat stood up, stretched elegantly, and a stick and long breath and lowered the stick. The cat stood up, stretched elegantly, then leapt onto the lantern stand by the door, curling into a tight ball beneath a glowing street lamp. It prepared to sleep. Watching it, I suddenly felt a little envious. At least it had found a warm place. As for me, I still had to keep walking, keep listening, keep standing watch in this silent city. The orange cat slept peacefully beneath the lantern, its belly rising and falling as if mocking the restless anxiety that had nowhere to go. I couldn't resist reaching out to touch its soft back. The moment my fingers brushed its fur, the cat's eyes snapped open. It shot me a look that clearly meant, "Who do you think you are?" Then it leapt down from the lantern stand and disappeared into the darkness once again. Even the cat didn't want to keep me company through the second half of the night. I sighed and forced my attention back to work. A patrol didn't mean simply glancing at each lamp to see if it was still burning. You had to check the oil levels as well. Some lamps still had plenty of oil, their flames steady and bright. Others were barely hanging on, the flame no larger than a red bean, ready to die out at any moment. From the cloth pouch at my waist, I pulled out a small bamboo tube, my spare oil container. Standing on tiptoe, I carefully poured oil into the shallow lamp dishes that were nearly empty. Refilling oil was a craft that required a certain talent. First, you had to steady the torch, usually tucked under your arm or stuck into your belt. But that alone could easily smother the flame. Then you had to remove the small wooden lid above the lamp dish with one hand while pouring oil from the bamboo tube with the other. You couldn't pour too much, or the oil would spill over the edge and run down the wooden frame. That wouldn't just waste precious fuel, it could start a fire. But you couldn't pour too little either, or the lamp wouldn't last until dawn and you'd have to come back again, which was already coated with a sticky layer of soot and oily residue. After refilling 2 lamps, my right hand was already blackened, like it had just been pulled out of a stove, smelling strongly of old grease. Instinctively, I tried to wipe my hand on my clothes. Blue cotton uniform had already been polished shiny by countless watchmen before me. One more smear wouldn't make any difference. That was when I heard water. Not the loud rush of flowing water, but a faint sound, like someone gently stirring the surface. Drip, drip, plip. I realized it was coming from a narrow canal beside the street. Kyoto in those days was crisscrossed with such artificial channels, drawing water from the Kamo River into the city for daily use. During the day, women would wash vegetables and clothes here. At night, it belonged to no one. I approached with the torch raised, about shin-high, and the bottom was lined with smooth pebbles. In the firelight, I could see slender fish darting through the water. But what caught my attention wasn't the fish. It was a stone on the opposite bank. The shape of that stone, how should I put it? It looked very much like a person squatting there. I blinked. The flame flickered. The stone turned back into just a stone. But the seed of unease had already been planted at times like this. It was an old Kyoto legend. They said that late at night by rivers or canals you might encounter a monk holding a baby. If you saw him, he would ask if you wanted to hold the child. If you refused, he would follow you, and the baby's crying would grow louder and louder until it terrified you out of your wits. But if you accepted the baby, that was when your real trouble began, because the child would grow heavier and heavier until the weight crushed you to the ground. And when you finally looked down, you would realize it wasn't a baby at all, but a stone, or a rotting corpse. Scholars still argue about the origin of this legend. Some say it was a story parents told to scare children away from rivers at night. Others believe it reflects the folk fear surrounding infants who died before receiving proper funerary rites. Still others think it might have been a trick used by criminals in certain periods to rob travelers at night. But for me, standing beside a real canal in the middle of the night, illuminated only by a swaying lantern, the legend suddenly felt very real. Then I heard a sound, very soft, very faint, like the cry of a baby. It came from downstream. My hands began to tremble. I told myself it was a cat, a night bird, the echo of water flowing over stones, but the sound became clearer. It really sounded like the sobbing of an infant. The old watchman had taught me what to do if I heard footsteps behind me. Don't turn around, but he had never taught me what to do if I heard a ghost crying in front of me. I raised the torch. The flame shook wildly in the night wind, throwing a jagged shadow across the opposite wall like some clawing monster. I took a deep breath and told myself, "You're a watchman. You have fire. You have a stick. You're an officially appointed guardian of the night. Even ghosts have to respect the curfew." I stepped forward toward the sound. 5 steps in, the crying suddenly stopped. A night bird burst out of the grass beside the canal with a loud flutter, flying straight over my head, its wings nearly brushing my face. I stumbled backward. My foot slipped, and I nearly fell into the canal. When I regained my balance and looked again, there was no monk crouched on the opposite bank, a still struggling mouse clamped in its mouth. It looked at me with an expression that seemed to say, "Never seen someone having a midnight snack." I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding wildly, my torch nearly dropping into the water. The cat carried off its prize and slowly disappeared into the night. I stood there for a long time, waiting for my heartbeat to calm down. Only then did I continue walking for the rest of the patrol. My eyes never wandered toward the canal again. By the time your heartbeat finally returns to a steady rhythm, the orange cat and its midnight snack have long disappeared into some corner to enjoy their meal. You stand alone on the empty street and suddenly realize that your earlier panic was hardly fitting for the dignity of an official night watchman. Fortunately, wait. You suddenly turn around and look toward the lantern at the street corner. A figure is standing beneath it. You almost cry out again. But when you look more closely, you realize it isn't a person. It's another you, forming the outline of a standing figure. In the flickering firelight, the silhouette sways slightly, as if someone were quietly standing guard. You decide to find something proper to do. Your eyes fall on another cloth pouch at your waist. Inside are the most important tools of the night: brush, ink, and a thin booklet. The booklet is called a patrol ledger, the night watch log, according to regulations. What exactly do you write? Which lamps went out and when? How much oil you added? Whether you encountered any suspicious people or animals? Whether you heard any unusual sounds? You find the brightest street lamp, squat down, place the booklet on your knees, and take out the ink stick and inkstone. Wait, an inkstone? You curse silently. Under nothing but lantern light, you actually have to grind your own ink. You open the lid of the inkstone and drip a few drops of water into it. The water came from the watch post. This barrel before you set out, carried in a small bamboo tube. Now it's warm, almost the same temperature as your body. Then you begin grinding the ink stick slowly against the stone. Grinding ink requires patience. Too fast and the ink will bubble, making the writing blur on the page. Too slow and dawn might arrive before the ink is ready. Just as you become fully absorbed in the task, you hear the clearest sound of the night. R-R-R, R-R. Not a ghost, not a beast, A human snore. It comes from behind the wooden door of the house beside you, powerful enough to cut through the silence like a saw grinding back and forth beside your ear. You pause, then almost laugh. Here you are outside, nervously keeping watch, while inside someone is sleeping more soundly than a pig. Why do they get to sleep while you have to stay awake, guarding their safety? But the feeling fades quickly, because you remember something. If you weren't keeping watch, their snoring might have stopped forever one day. The fires of the Edo era were terrifying. An entire street could turn into a sea of flames before anyone could escape. Your duty isn't only to tend these lamps. It's also to spot fires the moment they begin. Whether someone fell asleep with a candle burning or someone forgot to fully extinguish their hearth, pounding on the door and shouting for people to wake up. The ink is finally ready. You dip the brush and begin writing clumsily in the booklet. The brush scratches softly across the bamboo paper, the sound unusually loud in the silent night. What are you writing? Honestly, writing by lantern light is incredibly difficult. Every flicker of the flame makes the characters wobble before your eyes. By the time you finish one line and look back, you can barely recognize what you wrote in the previous one. But you still have to write, because it asks the rule. Officials from the magistrate's office sometimes inspect these patrol logs. If they find your writing sloppy, they'll assume you were lazy and didn't patrol properly. And if they discover you didn't write anything at all, well, congratulations. Tomorrow your ration of coarse rice might be cut in half after struggling through the night. Work report. The rough summary reads something like this. First half of the night, all normal. Second half, encountered Northern Watchman, exchanged information. Encountered suspected ghost figure. Turned out to be a night bird. Heard numerous snores, confirming residents are still alive. When you finish, you close the ink box and wipe the brush on the hem of your clothing. The uniform is already filthy. You tuck the booklet back into the pouch and stand up, stretching your numb knees. Far away in the east, the horizon is still thick with darkness. Dawn is a long way off. You look up at the street lanterns. They've endured the night for so long that some are beginning to tire. Their flames tremble in the breeze as if whispering to you, "We retired too." You walk over and add a little more oil to the weakest ones. Not much, just enough to keep them alive until dawn, without wasting precious fuel. Suddenly a thought occurs to you. If these lamps could talk, what would they be chatting about tonight? Would they complain that the new watchman, is clumsy at refilling oil and keeps spilling it over the sides? Or would they gossip about that snoring household, saying they make that racket every single night? The thought makes you laugh quietly to yourself. You realize that spending too long alone in the deep night does strange things to the mind. It's the brain's way of protecting itself. Filling the darkness with absurd thoughts to fight off fear and loneliness, you decide to walk the whole street once more, from this end to the other, and then back again. And then back again. One full round should take about half a toki. The torch in your hand burns steadily, casting a warm glow. The street is still the same street. The lamps are still the same lamps. But you know one thing for certain. More than half of the night has already passed. You've just reached the middle of the street when a gust of wind blows down from the north. At first, it only brushes lightly across your face, carrying the scent of mountain grass and trees. It even feels pleasant. After walking most of the night, your cotton uniform is already half soaked with sweat and dew. But then the second gust comes. Stronger than the first, it pushes the torch in your hand backward, the flame bending sharply, almost licking the sleeve of your coat. You quickly shield the torch in front of your body and turn your back to the wind. In that moment, when you lower your head, you catch a smell familiar, the smell of rain. That earthy scent that rises when the first drops hit dry ground is already drifting faintly in the wind. You look up. A moment ago, you could still see a few stars. Now the sky is completely covered by clouds. The darkness is thick and heavy, like a massive quilt thrown over the entire city of Kyoto. Your heart skips a beat. A line from the old watchman's training flashes through your mind. If it rains, then the lamps, then yourself. The problem is, how? You have no rain gear, no umbrella, no raincoat, not even a proper straw hat. The day shift watchmen get those. Under the eaves, you look down the street. There are indeed roof edges on both sides, but the overhangs are so narrow, they barely block straight rain, let alone wind-driven rain. The first raindrop lands on your face cold, heavy, like a small pebble falling from the sky. Then the second, the third. Within seconds, the rain thickens, rattling against the stone pavement, the wooden doors of the houses, and the lanterns you've spent the whole night guarding. You rush to the nearest lamp. The flame is already wavering, dodging raindrops like a helpless child. Without thinking, you place your body directly in front of it, shielding it like a mother hen protecting her chick. Rain pounds against your back, cold, sharp. Within moments your clothes are soaked through. But you don't dare move. You don't even dare lift a hand to wipe the rain from your face. If your body shifts even slightly, the wind will drive rain into the lamp, and the fragile flame will vanish with a soft hiss, leaving nothing but a thread of smoke. You hold the position, perfectly still. Time slows down. Each second stretches twice as long. You hear the rain, your breathing, the sound of cotton fabric growing heavier as it absorbs water. You have no idea how long the rain will last. You don't know what's happening to the other lamps down the street. But you can't worry about that. Right now, the only thing you can protect is the one in front of you. After some time, perhaps a few minutes, perhaps a quarter of an hour, the rain begins to weaken. The violent rattling softens into a steady drizzle, then fades to scattered drops. Slowly, stiffly, you straighten up. Your joints crack as you move. You look down at the lamp. It's still burning. The flame is smaller than before, but it burns stubbornly, as if thanking you. You don't even pause to catch your breath. You run to check the next one. Rain has soaked the oil dish and drowned the wick completely. You stand there looking at the dark lantern, feeling something complicated rise in your chest. Not anger, not guilt, but a deep helplessness. You did your best. But you are only one person, one body. The third lamp out, the fourth also out, the fifth still burning. You almost run to it, once again shielding it with your body until the rain finally stops for good. When the rain ends, you stand in the middle of the street and count the damage. They are the only flames left on the street. You look at the extinguished lamps. Their dark openings stare like four blind eyes. You already know what will happen next. Tomorrow morning, the magistrate's office will inspect the street. When they see 4 lamps fail to burn through the night, at least 30% of your pay will be deducted. If they're in a bad mood or if they're looking for someone to make an example of, you might even be summoned for questioning. that it rained. Of course, they know it rained. In their view, a watchman's duty is to keep the lamps burning in any weather. Rainwater drips from your hair into your eyes, mixing with sweat salty and bitter. You open one of the extinguished lanterns to inspect the oil dish. There is still oil inside, but the wick is ruined. You reach for your spare wick tube, only to realize it's empty. The 5 spare wicks you brought tonight are all gone. You stand in the damp street, soaked to the bone, cold and exhausted. The 3 remaining lamps burn quietly in the darkness like 3 comrades who refuse to surrender. Then, you lean against the wall of a house and close your eyes for a few minutes. During those few minutes, a strange question occurs to you. How did people in ancient times start fires? When you left the watch post tonight, your torch was lit from the charcoal brazier there. You carried it carefully all the way, terrified it might go out. But if it had gone out? Do you have a fire striker? A tinder roll? The answer is yes, but they're not very useful. In your gear, there is indeed a small bamboo tube containing fire paper, thin strips of treated paper that can preserve a glowing ember, which you must blow into flame. But on a rainy night like this, no ember will catch. Historians still debate how ordinary people in the Edo-period managed fire without matches. Some say they borrowed fire from neighbors. Some say temples kept eternal lamps for this purpose. If your torch goes out, you'll either stumble around in total darkness until dawn, or try to find your way back to the watch post by memory. Assuming you can still remember the way, you open your eyes and look at the torch in your hand. It's nearly burned down. How long will it last? Half an hour. The torch must not go out. You take out your spare torch from inside your coat. You've kept it pressed against your body all night, so it would stay dry. You wait until the old torch burns down to the length of your palm, then carefully light the new one. Whoosh. The new flame flickers in the damp air after the rain. You finally breathe a sigh of relief. 3 lamps left, 1 fresh torch, and a watchman who is completely soaked. After the rain, the air in Kyoto carries a strange mixture of smells. You take a deep breath of soil, the old woody fragrance released from soaked wooden doors, and the complicated odor rising from your damp clothes, something between sweat and greasy smoke. Strangely, the smell feels real. It reminds you that you are alive, still breathing, still standing in this night of the 17th century. You continue walking, though much more slowly now. It's not that you don't want to walk faster. You simply can't. Your straw sandals have been soaked soft by the rain, forcing you to step carefully with every stride to avoid slipping. Wet mud and bits of straw have worked their way between your toes, leaving them cold and itchy. Now you finally understand what the old watchmen meant when they said, "Work 3 years as a night watchman, and 8 out of 10 will end up with bad legs in the cold." But just as you drag your tired body, you stop ahead. Now, as a samurai residence, not the extravagant mansion of a great daimyo. But what truly makes you stop are the objects hanging on either side of the gate. Lanterns, not the crude street lanterns you tend, but real, elegant Yukadur lanterns. Their frames are woven from fine bamboo strips. The most outrageous part, inside each lantern burn 3 thick candles. Candles in that era are a luxury, made from wax pressed from the fruits of the sumac tree. When they burn, they produce almost no smoke, and their light is far brighter and steadier than oil lamps, casting a warm, stable light that barely flickers at all. The ground before the samurai gate is illuminated clearly. You stand at the border between light and darkness, and suddenly realize a harsh truth. The combined light of all the lamps you guarded through the night may still not equal. In the halo of light, you can see tiny insects drifting through the air. You can see the delicate patterns in the stone pavement. You can see the carved details on the wooden gate. Your street lamps can barely illuminate the ground beneath them. Their light exists so people don't trip in the dark. This light exists so people can see how important the house is. Here, in the simplest possible way, through light itself, the class divide of 17th century Kyoto stands plainly before you. You watch for a moment, then suddenly feel like laughing. You remember something an old watchman once said: the watch lamps are the poor man's moon. The lamps you light are moons for ordinary people. They hang neither too high nor too low. Their light is neither too bright nor too dim, just enough to keep someone from stumbling on their way home. Just enough for a late traveler to recognize their street. Just enough for a night vendor to read the markings on his scale. They aren't meant to shine brilliantly. They are meant simply to be enough. And enough is the standard of common people. Yet even that modest enough does not come easily. How long did you stand in the rain tonight to save those 3 lamps? Meanwhile, the servant of the samurai house probably only had to light the candles at dusk and then go back inside to sleep. He never needs to worry about rain extinguishing them. The gate's eaves extend far enough that even snow would struggle to reach the lanterns. Historians still debate whether urban lighting in the Edo-period existed mainly for public safety or to reinforce social hierarchy. Some argue the shogunate allowed expensive lanterns for samurai, precisely so commoners would always know their place. Others say it's simpler than that. Commoners simply couldn't afford candles. But at this moment, standing before that bright gate, with your soot-blackened torch in hand, you find the first explanation easier to believe. Just then, the black lacquered gate creaks open slightly. It's a watchman's habit until you know who someone is. Don't reveal yourself. A head pokes out through the crack. A servant in plain cotton clothes. He rubs his eyes and yawns. Without noticing you in the darkness, he walks straight to the lanterns and begins adjusting the candle wicks. So that's it. He's replacing the candles. Those bright candles burn quickly and need to be changed several times during the night. The servant works efficiently. Within moments, 3 fresh candles are in place. Those can be melted down and reused, or sold to peddlers for a few coins. After finishing, he yawns again and walks back inside. The black gate closes behind him with a quiet click. The entire scene unfolds only a few meters away from you. Yet he never notices you at all. Standing there in the shadows, you belong to the world that is not meant to be seen. Your job is to guard, not to be noticed. You are like the street lamps themselves. Your purpose is simply to give light, not to attract attention, but that's fine, you think. At least you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night like that servant. You're already awake anyway. Where only 3 lamps remain burning. The flame is steadier now. The oil dish is half full. The wick has been trimmed just right. Suddenly you feel a strange affection for the little lamp. It's like you. Both of you have been enduring this night. Both of you are waiting for dawn. You reach out and gently touch the lantern's paper shade. The washi paper is still warm, heated by the flame all night long. That warmth travels from your fingertips to your palm, then into your chest, giving your rain-soaked body its first hint of comfort. The final round takes much longer than you expected. Not just because you're tired, though you certainly are, but because you've begun to notice details you overlooked earlier. For instance, from the narrow gaps of tightly shut wooden doors, faint glimmers of light occasionally seep out, where the dying embers buried in their hearths glow softly. The red glow is so weak it looks like the tail of a firefly. You know what it means. If those embers were to flare up again in the middle of the night, or if a rat knocked over something flammable, it would become smoke and flame. And for a little longer than before, making sure no smoke is drifting out before moving on. When you reach the middle of the street, you hear a sound, not a cat. More rhythmic, more deliberate, like footsteps trying very hard to stay quiet. You stop walking. You hold your breath and listen carefully. Scrape, scrape. The scrape. The sound comes from the far end of the street. Very, very soft. If the rain hadn't washed the night into absolute silence, you would never have heard it. You tighten your grip on the short stick in your hand and raise the torch, trying to see in that direction. But your light is weak. It barely reaches a few meters ahead, while the sound is at least 15 meters away. You stand perfectly still. The scraping continues for a few seconds. Then it stops. The sound of a wooden door being pried open. You understand immediately. A thief. 17th century. Kyoto is safer than the chaos of the Warring States era. But thieves have never disappeared, especially at this hour before dawn. This is when people sleep the deepest. It's also when thieves prefer to work. A prosperous merchant household might hide a few decent garments, or several strings of copper coins. If luck is really good, there might even be a short sword left behind by a visiting samurai. So what should you do? The old watchman never taught you this. How to exchange night patrol signals. How not to turn around when you hear ghosts behind you. But he never taught you what to do when you meet a thief. Your duty is to guard the lamps, not to catch criminals. That's the job of the magistrate's constables. You're just a watchman. You carry a short stick that looks more like a rolling pin than a weapon. Your only real tool is a torch. Should you charge forward? Could you even win a fight? What if the thief has accomplices? If you rush in, you might not come back. You patrol the street all night. How could you possibly have missed the thief? The officials at the magistrate's office won't care about explanations like, "Not my responsibility." If you see a thief and don't act, they'll call it neglect of duty. The scraping starts again, this time clearer. Now there's also the faint sound of wood cracking. The thief has already pried the door loose. He's about to get inside. You take a deep breath. and make a decision. You raise the torch high and shout with all the strength in your lungs. "Who's there?" Your voice explodes through the silent street. It startles even you. Immediately, you hear chaos, hurried footsteps, something bumping into wood, a low curse. Then a figure bursts out of the darkness and sprints toward the far end of the street. Do you chase him? You glance at the torch in your hand, then at the few remaining street lamps still burning. If you run, the torch might go out in the wind. Those lamps will be left unattended. If you stay, the thief escapes, but the household is safe. You choose the latter. You remain where you are, torch raised, until the sound of running footsteps fades completely. Only then do you walk toward the pry door. The lower edge of the wooden door shows clear pry marks. The crack between the boards is wider now, but the door isn't open. You push it lightly. It's barred from the inside. The thief never made it in. You scared him off in time. You let out a long breath and lean against the doorframe, your heart pounding like a drum. Your shout didn't only scare the thief, it woke the neighbors. You hear rustling from nearby houses. Someone whispers, "What happened?" A child begins crying. Far away, a dog starts barking wildly. The same dog that had been silent all night until now. You stand there awkwardly, unsure what to say. After a while, the door creaks open. A man with messy hair and sleepy eyes peers out, gripping a wooden club. "Who are you?" he asks cautiously. "Night Watch," you reply, raising the torch so he can see your uniform. His expression shifts from suspicion to confusion, then to fear. He lowers his gaze and notices the pry marks on the door. His face turns pale. He opens his mouth to speak, but cannot find the words. After a long moment, he finally manages. "Was it you who drove him away?" You nod. In the dim interior, you can barely see his wife holding their child under a blanket, trembling. He turns back to you. His eyes are complicated. There is no thank you, no praise. He simply looks at you for a long moment. Then he slowly, almost imperceptibly, nods. That single nod carries more weight than any words of gratitude. He steps back inside and closes the damaged door. This time the bar drops loudly into place. You hear him add another bolt, then something heavy dragged behind the door for good measure. You stand outside for a moment, but because when dawn comes, that household will wake safely and begin another ordinary day. And somewhere in the city, that thief will be hiding in a corner, shaken by how close he came to being caught. You turn and continue walking. The remaining distance is short, yet it feels strangely long, because you suddenly understand the true meaning of this job. It isn't the small wage. It's this. When you finish walking through the night, every person in this city can open their eyes safely and see the light of dawn. You finish the last round and return to the lamp you lit at the very beginning of the night. It is the oldest lamp on the street, and the first companion you ignited tonight. It is still burning now, but the flame has shrunk to something pitiful. Only a thin layer of oil remains in the dish, and the wick has burned down to a tiny stub barely poking above the surface. Like the fingers of someone drowning, stretching desperately toward the air, you crouch down and look at it. It looks back at you with that faint light, a glow that could disappear at any moment. You watch each other for a long time. Neither of you says anything. You know it cannot last much longer, but it is still holding on. Just like you, the eastern horizon begins to change. Not brighter, at least not yet. Instead, the darkness itself grows lighter, like a drop of water falling into ink. The black slowly thins into deep gray. then into a quiet blue-gray. You stare in that direction and realize for the first time how dawn arrives both slowly because you've been waiting for it all night. Fast because when it finally comes, you barely have time to notice. From far away comes the sound of a bell. Dong, not a temple bell, but the alarm bell of a watch post somewhere in the city, reminding the night watchman to prepare for the shift change. The message travels across Kyoto. Morning is coming. You hear doors opening in the distance. People begin moving. Wooden clogs strike against stone pavement. Sharp, rhythmic sounds from early merchants heading to the markets. When no one objects, it bursts into full song. Then another bird joins. Then another. Soon the entire street fills with birdsong, clear and bright, unlike any sound you heard during the night. These sounds belong to the day. You stand up and walk to the lamp that is nearly extinguished. But this time you're not protecting it from rain. You're giving it one last bit of warmth. The flame trembles beneath your palm, as if it knows you're about to leave. Footsteps approach from the far end of the street, heavy, steady, carrying the fatigue of someone who has also been awake all night. A man in the same uniform as yours walks toward you, rubbing his eyes and yawning. In his hand is a brand new torch. He stops in front of you, glances at your face, then at the lamps. 4 went out. He asks. You nod. He sighs, but says nothing. He walks to one of the surviving lamps, opens the shade, and checks the oil dish. And he takes out his own oil flask and refills it, replacing the wick with a fresh one. You hand over the shift in silence. You tell him which lamps went out, which house nearly had a thief break in, and about the orange cat that wandered the street all night. He listens. Occasionally he nods. Once he asks, "Is the cat still around?" You shrug. Last time you saw it, it was by the canal with a mouse in its mouth. When the handover is finished, you give him your torch. He takes it, examines it, then hands it back. This one can burn a little longer. Take it to light your way home. The new watchman has already started his work, adding oil to another lamp. His silhouette stands alone in the slowly brightening morning, both lonely and steady. From now until noon, the street belongs to him. You continue walking. When you pass the house that almost got robbed, the door is open. The man is outside repairing the damaged doorframe. He notices you, straightens up. And you pass the canal. The orange cat is sitting by the water washing its face. It pauses to squint at you, then calmly resumes licking its paw. The candles have been collected by the servants. Only the empty frames hang silently beside the gate. You arrive at the watch post and push open the door. The room is dim, but brighter than when you left. Sunlight slips through the cracks of the paper door, drawing thin bands of light across the floor. You place the torch into its rack beside the entrance. You remove the uniform that has been soaked and dried and soaked again through the night, hanging it on a wooden peg on the wall. You walk over to the water clock basin and glance at the floating marker. It rests right around the mark for dawn, exactly as you expect. Then you lie down. There is no bed, only a thin futon spread over tatami mats and a hard wooden pillow. But at this moment it feels more comfortable than the softest feather mattress. You close your eyes. Outside, the sounds of the city grow louder, street vendors calling. Finally, can sleep. At the edge of fading consciousness, you think about the lamps. Are they still burning? Into another world. In that world there are no watchmen, no street lamps, no rainy nights, no thieves, only silence and endless darkness. You fall asleep. On a certain morning in 17th century Kyoto, you finally sink into a night that belongs to you. The oil inside them has burned away. Only a final curl of blackened wick remains. No one notices them, just as no one notices you. But you know that when the sun sets again, when the evening drum sounds, when the wooden doors close one by one, you will wake. You will take up the torch again. You will walk that street again. You will light those lamps again and again, year after year, until one day you no longer wake, and someone else will take your torch and walk the path you once walked, and the lamps will continue to burn on every night that needs light, in every corner that no one remembers, in every sleeping person's dream. For now, you can close your eyes in peace. Good night.